Okay, so let's finish off the questions for uh, prep test 31, game one, starting with number 4. It says, once Rachel has been assigned to a locker, what is the maximum number of different lockers, each of which could be the locker to which Juan is assigned? So when we translate that into our own language, they're basically saying, look, once you put Rachel down, how many different places can you put Juan down? Given, you just putting Rachel down, okay? So the thing is that we can't assume that, you know, every placement of Rachel will lead to the same number of possible placements for Juan unless we can prove that logically. So let's look at one example of putting Rachel down, and then we'll consider the general case, and we'll see if we need to consider each case individually or if there's some logical reason why we can come up with a maximum for Juan no matter where we place Rachel. Okay, so I put Rachel in 1. Now, if we put Rachel in 1, what is the maximum number of places that Juan could go? Well, Juan could not go in 1 because Rachel has to be by herself. So Juan could go in 2, and again, Juan would go in with Nita or Trisha, and then we would need to put the other shared locker with Nita or Trisha somewhere not next to Juan, who's in locker 2. So we could put the other shared locker, who's going to have Nita or Trisha in it, which is going to have Nita or Trisha in it, in like 4 or 5. So 1 and 2 is okay. Could we put 1 and 3? No, because Fred's already there. Juan's in a shared locker, has to be in with a girl. So Juan can't be in 3. Could we put 1 in 4? Yeah. And then we could put the other shared locker with Nita and Trisha over here in 2, and that would prevent Nita and Trisha from being next to each other, which is not allowed. So we could put 1 and 4. So far we could put 1 and 2 and 4. And could we put 1 and 5? Yeah. We put 1 with Nita or Trisha in 5. And then we put the other shared locker with Nita and Trisha either in 2 or 3. So if we put Rachel in 1, then Juan could go in 2, 4, or 5. So there's 3 possible places where Juan could go. Now let's think about it. Does that same result hold no matter where we put Rachel? And it does, right? No matter, uh, because we're looking for the maximum. So really, if the result didn't hold, then we would have to be able to get to more than 3, right? We would have to be able to come up with a placement for Rachel where we would then have more than 3 possible placements for Juan, okay? Because we're looking for the maximum. We've already proved we can do 3, so the question is, can we do 4, okay? And the answer to that question is no. And we don't need to test out each instance to know that. We can think about it, and we can say, well, wherever we put Rachel, okay, um, that spot is going to be off limits to Juan because Rachel has to be by herself. And the third spot is always going to be off limits to Juan because Juan cannot be with Fred. He has to share a locker with a girl. So there's going to be 2 spots right off the bat that are going to be off limits as soon as I place Rachel. Wherever I place Rachel and locker 3 because of Fred's there. So the maximum number of places that will be open once I place Rachel to then place Juan is going to be 3. And that's our answer here, C. Okay? A little bit of a complicated question in terms of what you have to think about to answer the question. And hopefully, though, the explanation that I just gave you clarifies it. If not, maybe listen to it again or think about it for a second or shoot me an email. Okay, so that's number 4. The answer is going to be C. Let's take Rachel off the board and let's do number 5. So it says, if the first 3 lockers are assigned to girls, which one of the following must be true? Okay, so the first 3 lockers are assigned to girls. So we have Nita, Trisha, and Rachel, who are going to have to be in these 3 lockers. All right, so let's think about how that could go. Remember, we know that between Nita and Trisha, whatever lockers they are in cannot be next to each other. But if we're going to cram all the girls into the first 3 lockers, then what that tells us is that Nita and Trisha are going to have to be in lockers 1 and 3. We don't know, whether Nita's going to be in 1 and Trisha's going to be in 3 or vice versa. But we know that Nita and Trisha neither of them can ever go in locker 2. And the reason is because if we're going to put all the girls in 1, 2, 3, then if we put one of Nita or Trisha in 2, then they would have to be next to each other because the one who's not in 2 from Nita and Trisha is going to have to be in 1 or 3, and that would put them next to 2. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm over explaining this, I just want to make sure that it's clear. So we know that 2 cannot be Nita or Trisha, which means it's going to have to be Rachel by herself. And then this is going to be Nita or Trisha. And over here is also going to be Nita or Trisha. And do we know who else is going to go with Nita or Trisha over here? And I'm assuming that you guys all said yes, we know, and it's going to be Juan. How do we know that it's going to be Juan? Because Juan has to be in a shared locker. There's only going to be 2 shared lockers. One of them was used up here in locker 3, and so the other one was going to have to be in 1. And so we know that Juan is going to be here in 1 with Nita or Trisha. Fred is going to be here in 3 with Nita or Trisha. And then 2 is going to be Rachel. And so who is left? We've used up all the girls, and so Mark and Paul are the only people who are left. So this would be like Mark/Paul, and then over here the same thing, Mark/Paul. And now we can answer the question. Which one of the following must be true? Okay. Juan is assigned to locker 1? Yeah, that's our answer. All right, and on a real test, you would just go, because checking all the rest of them is going to take you time, and you might not have time to be double checking or triple checking things that you are already like 95% sure about. So if you have a high level of confidence on the real test and the answer choice is A, that's a gift to save you a little time. Take it and move to the next question. But I'm going to review all of them again just because I don't know what people might have questions about. So we look at B, it says Nita is assigned to locker 3. Does that have to be true? No, it could be true, right? It could be Nita, but it doesn't have to be true because that, as we've shown in our diagram, could also be Trisha. So Trisha is assigned to locker 1. That's the same deal. It could be Trisha in locker 1, but it also could be Nita. Since we don't know, we can't say that it must be true. D says Juan is assigned to the same locker as Trisha. Again, that's very similar. It could be true, but on the other hand, it doesn't have to be true because Juan could be assigned with Nita. And then E says Paul is assigned to the same locker as Trisha, and actually that one cannot be true, right? Our diagram shows us that Paul is either going to be in 4 or 5, whereas Trisha is either going to be in 1 or 3. So there's no intersection for the possibilities of these 2 people. They can never be together. So we know for sure that it doesn't have to be true that they're together. In fact, like we just said, they can never be together. Okay? So our answer here is A. And we have one more question to do. Let's look at number 6. It says, if lockers 1 and 2 are each assigned to 1 boy and are not shared lockers, then locker 4 must be assigned to. So, and then we have to figure out who locker 4 must be assigned to. So it says lockers 1 and 2 are each assigned to 1 boy, and they're not shared. Okay, so 1 and 2 are just going to be boys, and they're not going to be shared. So 1 and 2. So who could not be in 1 and 2? Well, we know Juan's in a shared locker, so it can't be Juan. And then we know Fred's in locker 3, so it can't be Fred, right? So who's left? Mark and Paul. So locker 1 is going to have to be either Mark or Paul, and locker 2 is either going to have to be Paul or Mark. And then Fred, okay, remember we need 2 shared lockers, and these are not shared. 1 and 2 are not shared. So Fred is going to have to be in a shared locker, and it's going to have to be with Nita or Trisha. And now here's where we need to go back to the rule that Nita and Trisha can never be next to each other. Remember, 1 and 2 can't have Nita or Trisha because they're not shared. 3, we're going to have to put one of Nita or Trisha down, and the reason is because there's only 2 boys left after we get rid of Mark and Paul, Fred and Juan. So we know Fred and Juan are both going to have to be in shared lockers. We know Fred is already in locker 3, so we're going to have to put Nita or Trisha there in order to make that a shared locker. Now we remember that Nita and Trisha cannot be next to each other. So the other Nita Trisha is going to have to go here. And who's going to have to go in there with them? Juan. Why? Because he's the only other boy who's allowed to be in a shared locker. And we know that Nita or Trisha need a boy to be in a shared locker with them. And that puts Rachel right here, right? She has to be by herself. So this is a valid solution. In fact, as soon as they tell us that lockers 1 and 2 are each assigned to a boy and they're not shared, this becomes the only valid solution. Now, I should be clear. Clearly this is one valid solution, but there are like 4 different ways that this could go, right? We could put P first and then M, and then N and T, or we could put P first and then M and then T and N, or we could put M first and then P, and then N and T, or we could put M first and then P, and then put T and N, right? But this diagram is the only viable diagram, and then there's 4 possible ways this diagram could play out. But all they want to know is who must be assigned to locker 4. Who must be assigned to locker 4? Rachel, right? So that's answer choice C. And because it's so clear on a diagram, I'm not going to go over the other answers on this one. So Rachel has to be assigned to locker 4. Number 6 is C. So overall, hopefully you can see that this game is not that bad. You needed to make some deductions up front. Specifically, you needed to notice that Nita and Trisha had to be the girls in the shared lockers, and that Rachel, as they told you, had to be by herself. And we didn't know which boy was going to be in the second shared locker. We knew Juan was going to be in one of them. We didn't know which boy was going to be in the other one. But we knew that it had to be, one of the remaining boys besides Juan. So Fred, Mark, or Paul. And then the last thing that we had to know up front, or figure out up front, was that those 2 shared lockers, one which was going to be Juan with Nita or Trisha, and then the other one which was going to have a boy and then Nita or Trisha, that they couldn't be next to each other. Okay? And so those 2 simple facts, 1, that Nita and Trisha were going to have to be the girls in the shared lockers, and 2, that those shared lockers could not be next to each other, really kind of drove the action in this game. And hopefully you understand how we arrived at those 2 deductions. Okay, thanks.